Of wisdom from him. Let me open us in prayer and then I'll turn it over to Joel. Let's pray. Heavenly Father, we give you thanks for this wonderful and glorious day, this time of Advent, our time of waiting on the birth of our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. Be with us, be with our school ministries and all of our ministries as we share the gospel message each and every day. We ask you help us to always put that in the forefront of all things that we do as we reveal you in all things and always celebrate our faith each and every day. We ask to be with Joel as he presents today, guide him and allow him to provide us words of wisdom as how we might sustain and grow our ministries through fundraising. Be with all that we do and continue to sustain us and grow us to serve you and to do all to your glory. In your son's name we pray. Amen.
Amen.
So Joel comes to us with many years of being an executive director, administrator, and Lutheran educator, and runs many fundraising events, has served at multiple places, including starting a Lutheran high school. So he has done a lot of fundraising in his vocational career here in Lutheran schools, and will bring us all kinds of great ideas and a wealth of wisdom for us over the next 45 minutes to an hour. Joel?
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. Welcome to this event. I will tell you what, Minnesota, I think it was -5 this morning, but the good news is we're going to have a warming trend tomorrow. It's going to be the upper 20s. So we're really excited for the weekend here. It's going to be great. Before I begin, and I'll be sharing my screen here in a second, just one thing I want to let you know is everything I'm going to share is what's worked for the organizations that I've been responsible for. So Mayor Lutheran High School, Trinity Lutheran High School in Seymour, Indiana, at the time Baltimore Lutheran, which is now Concordia Prep in Towson, Maryland. And I would always just warn everybody, whatever I talk about, take what works for you, because everything really is local in the end. I mean, there are basic principles, but there's also a lot that works locally. And especially for my colleagues in the elementary schools, a lot of what I'm going to talk about is going to, it's a little odd because you have a church, and every week you raise money at your church. You make an ask every Sunday. They pass a collection plate around. And sometimes raising money in schools can get a little tricky when you're dealing with your church pastors, church councils, who themselves need to raise money. So just take everything that I talk about that will work for you and use it. And if it doesn't work for you, that's just fine. So anyway, thanks for joining. I'm going to share my screen now. We're going to get going. And I'm going to do this one more time. I'm going to stop share. I'm going to. There we go. Can you guys all see that by chance? No?
Share your screen again, and then just in the lower part, when you share it, you can click on presentation mode and it'll pop up in presentation.
Oh, it will. All right, perfect.
That Joel is on here for fundraising and not for technology.
That is correct. You are correct, sir.
Yep.
How do I get this up to so I can actually scroll through it?
Presentation mode right there. Yep.
There we go.
Perfect.
All right. Excellent. So how to raise $1 million. And obviously today is Friday the 13th. Just a couple of things about fundraising and development. And I think these are very true North Stars for us, compasses for us to guide. First of all, we always need to remember thriftiness is not a virtue. In fact, I would say in most of our schools where we struggle with finances, and Mayor Lutheran's no different. I mean, every year is a battle, of course, and we're not a choice state, so raising money is significant for us. But thriftiness, many of our challenges are not spending challenges, they're income challenges, right? Whether it be enrollment, whether it be fundraising, whether, whatever it may be. But thriftiness is not a virtue. Generosity is a virtue. And I would point out in Scripture, nowhere in Scripture that I've been able to find, and if somebody else finds it and can show me, I'd be grateful. Do we see where thriftiness is considered to be a virtue? There's examples of thriftiness. For example, after the feeding of the 5,000, they gathered leftovers, right? Good, thrifty, frugal behavior. But there's no words from Jesus specifically that I've been able to find that says thriftiness is the virtue. Rather, Scripture is all about generosity, right? For example, right in the Old Testament, the children of Israel were called to, when you reap the harvest of your land, you shall not reap your field right up to the edge, nor shall you gather the gleanings after your harvest. You shall leave them for the poor and the sojourner. I am the Lord your God. So there we are. You harvest your crops. Don't take it all. Leave some for those who don't have the ability to buy food. And if you remember the story of Ruth and Boaz, right? That's how she met Boaz. And she was out gleaning in that field. And he left a little extra for her. Of course, he liked the way she was picking up grain. And then, of course, we have Romans 8:32. He who did not spare his own son, but gave him up for us, how will he not also with him graciously give us all things? And I'll tell you, these are just two of many verses. I mean, the Bible is all about generosity, right? While we were still sinners, Christ would die for us. That's the most generous things God's ever done for us. So just a thing about raising money. Some people think there's a magic to it. You get the right guy or gal, you do the right stuff, and the money will roll in. And the reality of it is, in fundraising, and a lot of this will kind of sound like Captain Obvious. I acknowledge that too. But relationships are the only thing that matter. Relationships, when you're at your school or you're at your whatever organization might be, it's the people you know and those deep friendships that develop that make fundraising work. I have a goal to make a new friend each month. And when I say a new friend, I don't mean socially. I'm not much of a social butterfly. However, for the school here at Lutheran High, I try to make a new friend each month. So that's 12 new friends a year. And I've been here 19 years. You multiply that out, that begins to be quite a few friends. And it's a goal that's doable, and who are these friends? It might be a parent, it might be a grandparent of one of your students, it might be a member of your congregation, it might be a neighbor. You just never know. And so always have your spidey sense moving to to find friends. And of course, the other thing with it not being about money, it's all about your mission. Mission, mission, mission. If you take your eye off the mission and just try to get money, it's just not going to work. Especially it's not going to work in the long term. And the mission at Mayor Lutheran is to prepare the next generation of Christian leaders. And everything we do is tied into that mission. And as we raise money, it's you ask the donor, do you think the world needs more Christian leaders? Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Well, let me tell you about a place that's doing something here to raise Christian leaders. And let me tell you about Waldo. Speaking of relationships, Waldo was a Korean War vet. He had been on the front lines of the Korean War. He had his best friend shot right next to him. He came back. He would have had what we would call today PTSD. He had shock treatment. He was under treatment for a couple of years. Waldo's an amazing guy. He also had a farm. He's kind of a bachelor farmer, quite the guy. And I got to know Waldo because when I moved here in 2006, we used to have a big rummage sale in the summer. They called it the summer sale. And it was a big deal in this community. And Waldo, a lot of his older buddies would show up and kind of sit outside under a tree and watch the bicycles and the outdoor type equipment that would be people would be looking at. And I just started to chat with him, find out about him. Where's he from? What's his background? And Waldo and I became friends. And one day, probably 8-10 years after I first met Waldo, I used to go to his farm and we'd crack butternuts, if you know what that is. And we'd drink cider, and he would just tell me stories about his life. And an older bachelor guy was just looking for friends, and he and I hit it off. One day he comes into the office and he says to me, "I want to give Lutheran High my farm." And I looked at him, I said, "Waldo, your farm?" And he goes, "Yeah, I want to give the farm to you." He said, "There's going to be a couple of things that are going to be required. One is I got to be allowed to live on it until I can no longer live there. You got to sell it to my neighbor who's been farming it for the last 20 years anyway. And you've got to sell it at the price that I want to sell it for." And of course, who's going to boo that? And so we did. So the farm was a gift of, in the end, it was a gift of about $750,000. And here's the amazing thing about Waldo. I never asked him for a gift ever in all of our years. I just befriended him and loved him and built that relationship. And when Waldo gave us this gift, it was the biggest gift in Mare Lutheran's history, since to be passed by another fellow who I've got a story for in a minute. So it really, Waldo would never have given that if I hadn't cared to essentially to love him. And so it's not about the money. And that's why sometimes people say, you know, we got to raise money, we got to hire a development director. And then 2 or 3 years later, the development director is gone and they haven't raised any money. And you're kind of wondering, well, of course not. You know, there's not time for relationship development yet. And so when people, organizations do that, they have to recognize this is going to take time if you really want to be able to make money in the long run. And here's another really important thing. Why do people give to charity? The research is pretty clear. This has been clear research for the last 20 years. People are always looking into this with research that they're doing for their dissertations and so forth. And it's still pretty well true. The first reason people give is they believe in the mission. They believe in what your school is doing with preparing kids, either little kids, preschool kids, early childhood kids, smart alecky middle school kids. I mean, you name it. The mission, people believe in the mission. That's why they give. And that's why the mission is, you know, trumps everything. The second reason people give to a charity is they trust the leader. If you have an honest leader with integrity who does what they say they're going to do, under promises and over delivers, you know, that leader who loves the Lord, who has everybody else's goodwill in their mind as a priority, as opposed to their own, people trust the leader. And the third reason they give is they trust the efficacy of their gift. In other words, they know their gift will be used for what it was given. They know that it'll be managed appropriately and effectively by the organization. Nobody wants to give a gift to a nonprofit that is right now in court for mismanagement of funds. That's going to kind of ruin your annual fund there. And so those are the big three: believe in the mission, trust the leader, trust the efficacy of the gift. And in our organizations, we need to make sure these three things are in place. Obviously, the mission, you know, has to be very clearly laid out. Strategic planning, which I'll talk about in a minute. You got to trust the leader. Leadership is everything. That's why you're watching a webinar today here from LCMS schools, because leaders learn and are lifelong learners, but they trust the leader. And finally, you know, if your money management systems at your school aren't real strong, if your school, I know a school doesn't even have a budget. They're small. They've been doing the same thing for years. They don't have a budget. The people, you know, they want to make sure that you're going to be well run financially. So stewardship, you know, is a very important part. And I think a lot of this just makes sense to all of us. I'm sure everybody tuned in, you know, provides support to ministries and nonprofits in some way. I want to introduce you to a guy named Bill. One day I was out on on some kind of fundraising call, and I came back to school in the afternoon, and there was our recruitment guy, Dan was his name, is his name. Dan was just finishing a tour of our new school. We had done an expansion to the school, and we just with this guy named Bill. And Bill had heard about Mare Lutheran. He was Lutheran himself, Missouri Synod Lutheran. And he had heard about Mare Lutheran. He was driving past, and he just got the urge to stop and come in. He's retired. And so Bill came in, and he and I sat down in our office, and we chatted. And mostly it was me asking Bill about Bill. And over time, Bill and I have become good friends. And Bill is a guy who definitely knows that the world needs Christian leaders. Bill and I have developed that relationship I talked about earlier, where Bill's not just a donor, he's a friend. And Bill knows that our annual audits are public, that they're out there, and he's a businessman. And so this is very important to Bill. And Bill, 2 years ago, I sat down to ask him for a gift to our current capital campaign. And before I could even ask for the gift, he said, "We're going to give $1 million." Wow. I never asked Bill for a gift. Number one rule in fundraising: you want to ask. You got to ask. You got to ask. But for Bill, I never had. But these three pieces were in place for Bill. He wouldn't give a gift that size as a businessman, as a guy who watches his dollars carefully, unless we had those in place. And that's Bill. And the one thing I will tell you is, Bill sent me a message after he, shared that he was going to give us this gift. And by the way, amazingly, it came in one check with $1 million. I didn't even tell our business office person that this check was coming in. Can you imagine? Business office opens up an envelope and there's $1 million check in it. But Bill told me, he goes, when I went to visit Mayor Lutheran the first time, he goes, I was treated like I was the most important person on the earth. And he said, and you didn't know whether I had a penny to my name. And I think that's the real message here. Everybody is valuable. We know that because God made them, of course. But we treat everybody as if they're the most important person on the planet Earth, because you never know who the next bill is going to be. And we all have them. I know we do. Here's another big piece, and this goes back to your integrity as a school and so forth. But keep reliable records. Now, we use software. Our software package it was one we like. I'm not selling it. I'm not getting any residuals from sales, but we use, it's called Donor Perfect. And what we like about Donor Perfect is it's not highly sophisticated. So a typical school like Mayor Lutheran's, for example, we're small staff. We have a one-person business office. She does everything. And so the Donor Perfect, it allows us to maintain really good records. And what I also like about it has an app. So when somebody asks me about a particular person in the Mayor Lutheran family, and we've been around 63 years, so we have 3,500 alumni. I mean, there's a lot of people to keep track of. I can use the app and look it up real quick. I can see their giving history. I can see where they're living. And of course, the biggest challenge for all of our records is keeping them up to date. High schools, they graduate, they go off to college, they get a college email, then they get out of college and you don't know what happened to them again. And so we do have a alumni association we just formed about 1.5 years ago, which is a huge part of our fundraising strategy. You don't have to be sophisticated with your record keeping. You really just need records where you can do mailings for sure. It's best to actually hire to investigate and then purchase your own fundraising software. A lot of people try to do it by Excel, and Excel isn't really designed for that. Probably Access would be better. That's a database, but few people have those specialties in our schools. But I would absolutely just do some research. Probably the biggest fundraising software package is Blackbaud, and maybe some of you use Blackbaud. To me, Blackbaud is like using a jackhammer to drive in a pin. There's a lot to it. Colleges use it, hospitals use it. It's kind of the gold standard, but it's also very expensive. It's very sophisticated, and it requires a lot of training, of which many of our schools, we just don't have that ability to do that. And what we keep our metrics, and one of the metrics we keep is the number of gifts as well as the amount of the gifts. So how much do we raise each year? Well, at Mayor, we're in a capital campaign right now, so we've been raising over $1 million a year. Without the capital campaign, we raised right around probably 700 to 800,000 a year in all the different ways we raise money. But we look at not just that bottom line, which is important because it's a big portion of our budget, but we also want to look at the number of gifts. You grow the number of gifts. It's the $2 horse bet. Dave Hahn always talks about this. If you go to the racetrack and you put a measly $2 down on a horse, that's the most important equine since Secretariat to you. When somebody gives you some money, they start caring a great deal about you. And those $2 bets can grow very, very steadily through the years. Again, we're a high school. Graduates have no dough. They're paying college debt. But we encourage them to give a gift. And we always kind of try to break it down how small gifts make a difference. And so we have 3,500 alum. And I always give this little talk to the seniors each year before they graduate. If you each were to give $100 a year to your alma mater, that's like $2 a week. I don't know, a cup of coffee is more than that, I think. But if we each did that with 3,500 alum, we'd have $350,000 a year to do those things that they always wanted when they were here, but we couldn't because we didn't have the dough. And so growing the number of gifts is huge for us, and we keep track of that. And then, of course, you've got to account for the gifts for integrity's sake. And in some states, it's to keep you out of jail. There are states, Minnesota is one of them. Most states have laws about fundraising. And if you misuse a gift to your organization, say you're raising it to build a building, but you use it to run your operating budget, you can actually be brought to court. And so integrity is not just the right thing to do, but it also there's a legal piece. So count for your gifts. Nothing worse than somebody calls you in the middle of February and says, Joel, I never got a receipt or a thank you for my gift I gave last year. And nothing worse than that. And it does happen even to the very best schools. And sometimes things just get lost in the mail or what have you. And we take care of that. I'd like to share you a friend of mine named Nick. By the way, the very first point last year, but not this year. This is probably one of the best reports ever. And I have one right here in my office. Um, I just received it. We look at who didn't give this year yet, who has given in the past. And then it's a simple call. Joe, I'm just kind of going through. I notice you haven't given a gift yet this year. Is there some reason why that happened? And Joe will say, Joel, I just forgot. You know what? I'll get that check in right away. You almost don't have to ask. But just a reminder, as you guys know, I'm sure you get a lot of appeals in your mail this time of year. And a lot of people, they just pile them up and then they get around to them until they don't get around to them, and then you don't get their gift. And they won't get around to it. But if you give them a friendly call, and they get it. If they gave in the past, they love your school and they're going to give again. I'd like to share this story of Nick. And Nick is a friend of Mayor Lutheran, a very successful doctor. He lives on the West Coast. And Nick, when I moved here, I noticed was giving a gift of a couple $100 a month regularly. They've been doing it for years. And then one day, and going through the database, and I do that regularly, I just go through and see, who's giving and who are the largest donors, and you should know all those in your mind. You don't even need to look it up. Nick had stopped giving. And because of our record keeping and because of the Liebunt report, I gave him a call. And I said, Nick, you used to be a regular giver. And I didn't know him. I was fairly new here in the Lutheran High. And I said, got to know him a little bit. We chatted. And then I said, you used to give a gift and you stopped. Is there a reason? And his answer was, you know what? I live on the West Coast. I've just kind of lost contact. I really don't know what my gift's been doing at Mayor Lutheran. So then I, proceeded to kind of tell him what his dollar was doing and how much we needed his support and how valuable it was. And within a couple of months, he was back to giving. In fact, he had upped it to $1,000 a month. It's one of those great lessons about having your records. I never would have called Nick otherwise. I would have lost a $12,000 a year gift if we hadn't kept good records. The next piece is the annual fund as we talk about fundraising. Most of us in our schools do not charge the actual cost of education. And this is my longtime speech about Mayor Lutheran. At Mayor Lutheran, it costs us about $20,000 per kid. We just take the bottom line of the budget and divide by the number of students enrolled. We charge $12,240 tuition. The average family with financial aid pays right around $8,400. So here we're offering a product that's cost 20 grand per child, and we're only bringing in 8,300. It's a pretty rotten business model, and we've been doing it at Mayor for 63 years, and I'm sure many of our schools are similar. Some of us, the gap is closed by the congregation. Some of us are churches where the church is saying the school's got to be self-sufficient. We're not going to keep closing your gap. But ultimately, fundraising, especially for independent schools that may be an association school or may not be attached directly to one particular congregation, like high schools are typically that way. Closing the gap is a big deal, and that's where the annual fund comes in. Some schools, we don't do that at Mayor, but some schools very wisely, especially if they're somewhat understaffed, will have an annual fund committee. And what these people will do is they will develop the plan, they'll develop the letter or what have you, the appeal, and they themselves will go after donors to give to an annual gift. And of course, the annual gift comes in, usually our annual fund, we tie it directly into student tuition assistance. Again, we're charging, it costs 20 grand, we're charging 12,240. Every kid is getting around an $8,000 gift. Almost every kid is. And then if they apply for financial aid and they're paying 8,000, well now, we're at 12,000 of a gap. And so all that money that we receive, we tie into financial aid. And of course, it's justified. We can absolutely justify it. And people love that idea of helping folks. Online giving is a must. Mobile giving even better if you can get people to give on their cell phones. I don't even know where the checkbook is in our household. My wife, she does the household finances. And so if I want to give, I take my credit card and I give, and then I explain it to her later when she sees the bill come in. But online giving is huge. One thing we've started doing at Mayor too is the QR code. We love the QR code. So on our thank you letters, and I'll talk about this in just a minute, but in our thank you letters, we're beginning to put a QR code so they can snap the phone and be right at our giving page. I would use that QR code as much as you can. They're not hard to make. And of course, all this assumes you have an online giving platform. And if not, today's not really the episode to talk about that. But there are plenty of ways that people can give online. And often what you need to do is find a local school that's doing a good job. You see it on their website and talk to them. Say, hey, who do you use? How do you do this? Here's the other thing too on the annual fund. Usually it's done with a letter. We send our letter out in October. We do most of our heavy fundraising late in the year. And the letter this year was about a graduate, young graduate gal who bought a coffee shop in the nearby town, and she is making a go of it. And it shows aspirational life decisions for her. It shows hard work. It shows luck and pluck and all those things we in America love about our people and about people who young people who graduate from high school. And we told the story, and she and her three sisters, farmers' kids, got lots of financial aid in their time here. And she was grateful to tell the story. And the reason that she could, because she realized her story would help generate more money for more kids for financial aid. Sometimes I get letters in the mail asking for money. It's a one-page letter, and they just basically say, we need money. We know you, you know us, send it in. Here's an envelope. And that's not really a very inspiring appeal letter, especially since we're getting tons of these in our mailboxes. So we usually do a 4-page letter. We do it as kind of a booklet style, color photos and all those kind of things. Lots of photos, not a ton of words because people don't like to read a lot these days. And ultimately, then at the end, we tell the good story, why these funds make a difference. And then we very clearly tell the reader what we want them to do. Don't assume they know what to do. So the ask, every letter has an ask. And the ask simply says, this year we need X number of dollars for financial aid for our students who couldn't be here otherwise. Please write a check or go to our website or whatever, click on this QR code and send us a gift. And we're grateful for your support. And you got to do that and always keep the mission front and center. And again, our mission is preparing Christian leaders. Who's going to boo in our world preparing Christian leaders? And yours, you may have another compelling mission for your school. And let me tell you about Roxy. These stories are sometimes a little awkward because some people don't want the fact that they got financial aid broadcast to the whole world. But you do need to broadcast it. And it's their way to give back. And so Roxy was a mom, actually 2 of our graduates now. And Roxy had cancer, and she had it pretty bad. And they received, and her husband was a builder who had been injured on the job and had been one of those victims of the painkiller addiction, and it just wasn't healthy. And she needed financial aid. She got lots of it for her children. She called me one day, said, Joel, you guys have been great. Could I tell my story on your appeal this year? Never has happened before, I might add. Nobody's ever come to me. And I said, yeah, sure thing, Roxy. And it was such a compelling story that people talked about it. Even people who didn't give a gift, they read this story and they loved it. And of course, stories are golden. That's why I'm telling you stories on my presentation today. They're just golden. And that's what's going to make people, their heart give. People don't give because it's logical. Again, they don't give because you have a need. They give because somehow their heart is reaching out to yours. And again, personal contact is everything. Be bold. So we are not in a good financial year this year. We missed our enrollment goal by 15 kids, which is roughly $150,000 shy. And our recent newsletter, I wrote an article about how I get a front row seat in the lives of our kids. And I love my job because I get that front row seat. And I also get a front row seat to see God at work. And this is a year where I'm definitely seeing God at work because we're short and we don't run deficit budgets here. And I just happened to mention in my newsletter that this is a tough year this year. We missed our enrollment goal, and we're having to scrimp and save and be careful, and it's just that. And one of our donors, a good friend of mine, again lives out of state, texted me, said, "Joel, how much are you shy?" And I just responded. I said, "We're shy 150,000." And he goes, "I'm going to help with that. Would 25,000 work?" This is all over text, by the way, in personal contact. And of course I said, "No, we need 150. If you could, give us 150." No, I didn't say that. I said, "Yes, of course. Thank you very much." And his gift is on its way. But you got to be bold and you've got to ask. And I lived in Seymour, Indiana, home of John Mellencamp. John Mellencamp gave a large gift to the university, Indiana University, for a football facility there. I think it was a practice facility. And as the story goes, somebody said, "Why didn't you give it to the music room or the music program?" And he said, "Well, the music program didn't ask for a gift. The football program asked for a gift." Asking is the key. And I told you I had some gifts from friends who I never asked for gifts before, but you've got to ask. And I've been here now 19 years. And so I built a reputation that I'm not afraid to ask. And when people see me, they know what's going to happen and they're okay with it because they love that school, right? And this is, there's two things people just really fear. It's public speaking and asking for gifts. And a longtime friend told me, if you're willing to public speak and ask for gifts, you'll always have a job. And of course, the job I have is a great one because it helps prepare Christian leaders, right? But you've got to ask. And that's one reason people don't raise money sometimes is they're uneasy asking. And when you ask, be bold. No, so if you go to a friend and say, "You know what, could you give us $100,000 gift for our campaign?" And you think, "Wow, I'm not going to insult them." You're not. You are telling them you think they're very successful and that they can give a large gift like that. And so when you're bold, you're actually oftentimes not insulting and you're not looking like a doofus, but rather you're looking like somebody who's complimenting the individual because you believe they're so successful that they can help you in that level. So always be bold. So the annual fund's a big one for us. The next one is estate planning, and this is the best time in history for estate planning. The greatest generation, our grandparents, great grandparents, who lived through the Depression, lived through World War II, World War I, World War II. These are the people that we just so admire them. They're dying pretty quickly. There aren't a whole lot of World War II veterans around anymore. When I was a little kid, I think all of my friends' dads were in the World War II or the Korean War or something like that. The younger kids or dads were in the Vietnam War. But the greatest generation is dying off, and they've been very generous. They understand philanthropy. They're incredibly generous. But the baby boomers, of which I am one, I was born in 1960, and it goes up to 64, actually, is where they kind of cut that off. The baby boomers learned philanthropy from the greatest generation, and they are very generous donors. And there's lots of them. There's gobs of baby boomers, way more than the greatest generation. Anybody who got through the last 20 or 30 years and kept successful fundraising going, were very fortunate because there weren't as many greatest generation people to give those gifts. But the baby boomers, there's tons of them. This is the best time ever. We got a 20-year window. And this is a lot of money that's going to be transferred to charities. And so estate planning is a big deal. And I live here in the Twin Cities area, west of the metro, and I drive by a Prince's house all the time. Purple Rain, right? And Prince Rogers is his name. And when Prince died a few years ago, he didn't have a will. He left no will. And you can imagine this wealthy entertainer with a lot of dough. It became a big piece of news. And I oftentimes use the Prince story when I talk to our friends. And oftentimes I break the conversation and say, do you have an estate plan in place? Do you have like a will or whatever? And if they say no, then I'll say, you know, you don't want to be like Prince. You don't want to end up like that. And I'm not an estate expert by any stretch of the imagination, planning expert. But we communicate the need everywhere. So when we send any envelope to somebody's house, on the back flap, there is a whole thing about estate planning and put Mayor Lutheran in your estate. Always keep that in front of people as you can, even if it's just background. Keep that there, communicate it. And you don't have to be the smartest guy. You just have to know the smartest guy. And our smartest guy is a guy named Kurt Fuhr. Kurt, in our area, works for the LCMS Foundation. And we greatly rely on the LCMS Foundation in helping our people put Mayor Lutheran in their will. And we all have that access. And I think it's really important for all of us to put a plan together. And again, if we're at a church school, to communicate this with our church as well, to have regular every 3 or 4 years, movements of encouraging people to do a financial planning, charitable planning. And probably one of the best things you can do for that is work with your LCMS, a person in your area. They will be very helpful to help you. And then, of course, what we have done with estate planning is when you do put us in your estate, we enter you into our club. It's called a Heritage Society. You should have an estate club of some sort. And we give them a small trinket. It's a lucite paperweight. And it's important that you really emphasize that by having that club. And then once a year, inviting everybody who's put your estate plan, invite them for a lunch or a dinner or a special night at an event. Or something like that, just to kind of remind them how grateful you are for them putting the school in the will. And this is the legacy we all leave to our schools, is the estate planning. I followed a legacy, a guy named Erland Schrader, who was fantastic at estate planning. And Mayor Lutheran now has a strong culture of estate planning, largely because he did this for 20 some years. And I had the blessing to inherit this culture. So remind everywhere, and don't let estate planning go away. Because every day you put it away and somebody dies, you've lost out on a potential gift. The next kind of fundraising piece is the capital campaign. And we're in one right now here at Merida. We're building science wings. But before you ever embark on a capital campaign, make sure you have a fresh, updated strategic plan. And you use that strategic plan. This is great advice. And I've been doing this a long time, and I just got this advice a couple of years ago. You take your new strategic plan to your donors, especially your larger donors who are going to make the difference in your campaign. And you take it to them and say, hey, here's our new proposed strategic plan. The board hasn't approved it yet. And then the 4 magic words, what do you think? And when you ask that, don't be like me, close your mouth and listen. And they will tell you what they think. And as they tell you what they think about your strategic plan, you will also hear what they probably might be willing to help fund. So one of our aspects of our capital campaign is we started a campus pastor on campus, and we wanted money to fund this for the next 3 years till we grow our enrollment, that then will pay for that position. And I had a friend, she's a board member. She and her husband, very supportive members of the community here. And I showed them the strategic plan, and they said, we love that, pastor. That's been a long time. We've needed that for a long time. Well, bingo, guess who's one of our largest supporters then for that pastor? They gave half of what we needed. They gave 150,000 of the 300,000 that we needed, because I listened. And when I asked, it was so natural. It wasn't even uneasy. And here's a great line. Please remember this. If you want advice, ask for money. If you want money, ask for advice. So those donors who are the guy who gave us $1 million for our campaign, he is on our building committee. I made sure he was on our building committee because as he goes through the building committee process and he sees all building committees, you can't do everything you want. You always have a lot of dough to do it. He's going to hear this, and there's some things that are very important to him that he absolutely wants to see done. And I'm sure at some point he will step up to help pay for that. But absolutely, those people who have the capacity in your school or church or community to help, don't just ask them for money up front, but get them engaged, obviously, in relationships first and foremost. And second of all, something at your school that they can be involved with. Because the more you ask for advice, the more they see the need for money to carry out their advice. And a capital campaign is for a specific purpose. It's not for your annual fund. It's not to close your gap. You do not take capital campaign money and use it for operating expenses. I can tell you horror stories of some schools I know that have done that, and it's not only unethical, it could be illegal, but it's always for a specific purpose. It doesn't have to be for building, although many times we look at it that. Sometimes it can be, the worst one actually is debt reduction, right? If you got debt, I mean, nobody gets excited about debt reduction. There's nothing to show them. There's no picture. There's no happy kids, burning a mortgage in your picture. There's none of that stuff. So what you want is to make sure that that specific purpose is something that's going to appeal to your donors because you've asked them for advice, and your strategic plan is going to play into that. Your case statement is the key. Why are we doing this? We just did about an $8.5 million addition with a field house and office space and a commons area with a fireplace and all this stuff here at Mare. We did it back in 2018, moved in. And the case statement was very clear. We wanted to serve our kids better. We wanted to serve our guests better. The school's an old building that wasn't accessible. We want to serve our guests better. We have a community group called the Knights Program, a youth community. Anyway, with all of that stuff, we made sure that we could serve our Knights program better. And ultimately, we wanted to use it for recruitment. So we rent our facility out. And those 4 points, I could say them in my sleep. And there was no confusion by anybody. And here's the real key of capital campaigning, the 90-10 rule. Blessed donors make it work. What 90-10 means is 90% of your money will come from 10% of your people. Sometimes people say, well, we're going to ask for $1,000 from 1,000 people. No, it doesn't work that way. If you're going to make your capital campaign successful, you need to have those with the capacity, those blessed donors. And typically, as it will shake out, it'll typically be 90-10. This has changed through the years. When I first started raising money, it was the 80-20 rule. But today, and largely because wealth has increased so much, it's gone to the 90-10. And of course, if you need help, lean on LCEF. I'm doing commercials for LCEF and LCMS Foundation today because they're good and I believe in them. And LCEF can help you with your capital campaign, especially if you don't have the experience or you don't have the know-how or you don't have nearby folks who can help you with this. I help out local schools and churches all the time with advice and sometimes too then with money, right? What about special events? This is a big question point. You put a ton of work into a golf outing and you make $10,000. Well, what if we just asked 5 people for $2,000? A lot less work and probably every bit as efficient. But know the purpose of your special events, why you're doing it. So our golf outing every year, this year it raised $51,000. It's the first time we've ever cracked the 50,000 barrier. And the purpose is for technology at Lutheran High. Nobody wants a lacking technological environment. And so when you have events, know that that isn't really the end all, the be all for your fundraising. Last Friday, we had our gala. It's called Celebrate His Harvest. We brought in over $180,000, which, by the way, sounds like a lot of dough. However, there are lots of Lutheran high schools that are raising significantly more than that. And so know the purpose. Our Celebrate His Harvest money is not for technology. It is for financial aid. And when you bring out kids and you show the kids to these folks, they love it. And the other thing we like about our gala is most of the time we gather for sporting events at Mare Lutheran. That's the only time our people who love the school really come together is for sporting events. But we wanted to have a celebration time that wasn't related to sports. And so that event brings new people to our school. We have people who invite folks to the table. We also use our special events for recruiting purposes. So we give a table to each of our feeder schools for the principals then to load that table up with prospective parents who may not know much about us yet, but the event is so well done, it warms them very quickly to our mission. And I see Dan Mazur's with us. Dan did a great job with us from Trinity Lutheran School in Waconia, filling a table up last week. And we think that's going to have benefits for some of those families enrolling their children. The jury's out about special events. Some places have just said we're not doing them. They can make more money by doing the ask, by doing just old-fashioned asking for gifts instead of wearing out your volunteers. Other places love the special events. That's almost all their fundraising is. And I would say a good mix is probably healthy. So we use them to grow enrollment and to bring new donors to hear the story. Remember, one of our goals is always to make a new friend every month. Well, last Friday, we made like 200 friends in one fell swoop. And not necessarily that they were big donors, but nevertheless, they're donors anyway. And the question is, do these people who lead this, are they volunteers or paid? At some of our schools, the old PTL model, I don't know how many of us still have that. That's kind of the moms who do it, right? But we know today there aren't many moms left to do a lot of volunteering. So many folks work. And so maybe you do a paid. So at Mayor a few years ago, we made it into a paid position. It's not a ton. It's not a ton. And virtually like all of us, what they're paid is really they're volunteers and they're doing it because they love the school, love the Lord. But it is worthy to consider paying them. And you only have so much time. And so when you look at special events, look at how much time is going into that and how much income is coming out of that. Here's a big piece, absolutely big piece that still is astounding to me. Promptly send thank you letters. And when I sign a thank you letter, I always sign my name and a short note. Thanks, Pete. I really appreciated seeing you and Amy last week. That was fun. Or at this time of year, it's almost every same. Thank you for your support of our kids. Have a blessed Christmas and a joyous New Year. But a handwritten note, it doesn't matter. You can say the same thing to each person. They're not going to know. They don't compare thank you letters. But promptly is the key, right? And a lot of times when people give online, I'll get an email that Joe Schmo just gave a gift. I will call Joe right there at that time if it's not like 1 in the morning and say, Joe, thanks so much for your gift. And they're stunned that you care enough to do that. But why not? You got an email, and it's not like we get thousands of these a day, so it's very doable. But promptly send thank yous. Follow up with a call if you want to get repeated gifts. If you want to lower your LIBUNT report last year, but not this year, call every donor who gives you a gift. Big gift, small gift, not a problem. And you get their voicemail, that's fine. To say, Joe, thanks for your gift. You know how important it is for our kids. You are just such a good friend. Thank you. And have a great Christmas. And then hang up. That, you'd be surprised, that simple little act is just so powerful. And if you can't do it, that's okay. If you have 8th graders who are decent 8th graders, right? They know how to speak and you trust them. You can have your 8th graders one day say, today we're not going to have history. Sorry about that. Instead, we're going to call people who have made this school possible. You make up a little list of names. The kids don't know how much they gave. But if you're a donor, you get a call from Sally, who's in 8th grade, thanking you for a gift. That is dynamite, right? And we always, when we send a thank you letter, we always include an envelope. It gives them the hint that they should use it again. And we're also on our thank you letters now putting a QR code where they can give online if they'd like to. And on the back of our envelope, we have a little message about, make sure you put us in your estate. Here's a really useful thing. We haven't done this enough at Mayor as much as I would like, but create a bank of thank you cards from students and board, and you can write the script for them. They don't even have to think it through. And you have like your board members have each board member do 10 or 20 or 30 of these thank you cards. And then you send them to your donors in addition to their receipt letter and all that official stuff. Because the board, after all, and I don't know if I'm going to get to that here, but the board is definitely your leader in fundraising. They have to be. So we have a rule on our board that says give, get, or get off. Our board members are expected, 100% are expected to give a gift every year. And I just yesterday realized they all did. And they don't join our board. They can't do that. They don't want to give. Okay, but you can't be on the board. You're making decisions. You have to have skin in that game. And our board then of course, they're also very interested in fundraising because they do have their own skin in the game. Why I love the LWML. I was talking to the LWML district president here, former district president, and she was telling me how few of their missions that they gave money to, the missionaries largely, how few ever even send a thank you card. Can you believe it? She said over half the people, the LWML that they gave mission grants to, did not even send a thank you email, call, or card, or letter. And I'm stunned. Gratitude goes a long way. So make sure you use it there. And I think we're done. We got 10 minutes for questions and answers, and I will hang up. I'm not going to show this. This is, Al can send this out to you, but this is what fundraising looks like. But I think I'd much rather go to Q&A right now. So I will stop the show.
All right, thank you, Joel. And it's probably good that you didn't show that because we'd be in violation there during our live Facebook time and they would probably take us down. But we'll
And
definitely
Allie,
send this
you're a
out.
genius, so I'm glad we didn't. All right. So what questions could I answer maybe?
So as people are getting ready, please put your questions either in Facebook there. We have the spot to put questions or in the Zoom chat. Put some questions in there. Will is going to monitor that. And as he does so, I'm just going to comment a couple things. First, thanks, Joel. That was great, obviously. That's why we asked you to do it. I'm going to break down kind of four things here, though, that I think you really hit on and are at the crux of fundraising. Relationships, right? And you said that, you know, make sure that everyone knows that they're the most important person, right? That's what we're after. That's about the relationships. And no matter, I go to Walt Disney. If it's your 20th time or your first time, make the experience like it's your first time. They know that they're important. You have to ask. You don't ask, you might still get, but it may not be what you're after or anything else. There are some committed people that send funds to our schools even when we don't ask. But you do have to ask. Relationship and the ask. Communicate. How many times do we hear, the only time I ever hear from you is when you're asking for money. It's constant communication. So make sure that you're always communicating about your school and the great ministry that's happening there, the stories that you're telling them all the time and it's going out. And communicate too then when it is time to ask, right? And they know that. You, again, go to number one, build that relationship because of all of that communication and telling the story over and over again and highlighting what's going on. And then I always used to say, everything we do is admissions and fundraising.
Sure.
So somebody walks in the building, if our building doesn't look good, you just ruin some admission and fundraising. Or, an event doesn't go well. It reflects on your admission and fundraising. So make sure that that's constantly in the forefront. More people today obviously are giving with credit cards or, wire transfers or whatever from bank accounts. I'll just make a pitch out there. You did a couple. One of the things about LCMS schools, we have what other school systems do not, and that's an amazing network, Concordia plans, LCEF, LCMS Foundation. We have more support for what we do than any system out there, and they're always willing to help. I'll add another one, Lutheran Federal Credit Union. I should probably check on this. I don't know if they still do this, but back in the days when I was head of school or in the Missouri district, Lutheran Federal Credit Union, if you take credit cards, used to charge 1.7%, where most companies will charge 3 to 5% per transaction.
And by the way, let me interrupt you.
Too.
Let me interrupt on the credit card. We do ask our families when they give online, our donors, to pay for the fee. And I would say 98% of them will do that. So they'll give a $100 gift. They'll give us a gift of $103. And I would tell everybody, don't be afraid to ask them to pay the fee because the experience has shown they'll do it. And they don't feel bad. Everybody's paying fees, right? I bought a $6 Twins ticket and I paid $18 for it after fees, right? Everybody's used to it. So
yeah, it's definitely something we do. Ask them to pay the fee, but it's a lot easier asking them to pay a 1.7% than a 5%. And especially, even if you're doing a golf outing, sometimes you get the donations or the credit card swipes and stuff. So, and it helps us, when you're out there fundraising, saying that, hey, we use Lutheran Federal Credit Union that has a lower fee rate. So it doesn't show, it shows that you're conscious always of every dollar that's coming in and going out, what you're doing.
Al, another thing too, and we all know this, that's why we tuned in today, right? Always learning. And I did not know that. So I'm going to absolutely pursue that. Say some dough. Hey, one other thing too, we do an annual fund. Another thing we do at Mayor, and maybe you do this as well. We do an annual Advent devotion booklet. And you can see it's pretty well taken. It's pretty well done. We get a sponsor, one of our investment people who manages our school's endowments. He's a very generous guy, so he's a sponsor. And then we went over to Concordia St. Paul and got some money from them as well to sponsor this book. But this book goes out to everybody, and it's Advent devotions. And if you want to show the product of what your money is going to, here are kids. The kids write these, juniors and seniors write these, and they're pretty well done. Now, don't make a big deal in St. Louis because I'm the doctrinal review guy on this one. So, but
don't worry, we'll cut that out of this episode
yeah,
too.
and in the back we put our association churches, we put our association schools, so they get the love there. And people look forward. They start calling us in early November. Do you have the Advent devotion books yet? And we have there's a little devotional liturgy in the front. So, and we don't ask for a gift necessarily, but we will staple. This doesn't have it. We'll staple an envelope right in the middle. And going forward, we'll have the QR code, right? We're putting the QR code on everything. But people love this stuff, and they think you're the best thing since sliced bread when their Advent is spent with your kids. So,
well, that's it, right? Highlight the work of the students, because that's our ministry, is pouring into them and the work that they're doing. We get it done by having buildings and all the furnishings that we need and everything else, but it's highlighting the students. And we do have a question for you. What it's the donor database. Go ahead, Will.
Yeah, what's the donor database that you use? I know there's a whole bunch of different companies out there. Or you can
we use Donor Perfect. It's called Donor Perfect. And we're very happy with it. It's very powerful. It's well known. It's not it's not something out there. People in the fundraising world will know it. And we like it. For a school our size, again, we raise, in the end, probably about $1 million a year. And we're 200 kids school, and with it really does the job for us. It's a power horse. It really is a powerhouse. So
yeah, and there are others that are out there. So Donor Perfect is a big one that many utilize. Blackbaud's out there. Tapestry is out there.
Big thing is just make sure you're getting what works for you, what's best for you, because otherwise you can get saddled with a $10,000 program and paying that yearly.
And somebody has to be able to operate it.
Yeah, you got to watch out for the contracts as well, because sometimes you get locked in and you made a bad decision. You need to be able to make sure that you can pivot from that.
Right. So let me tell you another thing too. Our gala, we use software. It's called Greater Giving. Pretty common. A lot of people use Greater Giving. But we found out after we signed a 5-year contract with Greater Giving, which we're not disappointed. It's been a very successful program, very helpful for us. Donor Perfect itself had a gala, event piece with it that we could sign into, and we're probably going to do that moving forward. I think we got 1 year left on our Greater Giving contract, because then all that stuff from the auction will flow right into the fundraising reports and so forth. Any other questions?
Well, I think that's important too, is ask others, what are they using and how much do they like it, or how little do they like it? What is working for you, and find out. And sometimes you might even be able to leverage a little bit. If some of you are in the same area going with the same company, you might be able to leverage a little bit more too. Never be scared to ask, right?
Right.
Even when you're purchasing something to help you fundraise, don't be scared to ask there.
And I would say the best thing to do too is talk to schools like yours. Don't call up Concordia, Nebraska, and ask who their fundraising software is. It's like a jackhammer for a pin. But if you have another school your size nearby, especially if they're somewhat successful in fundraising, make them your friends. If they're Lutheran or some other denomination or private school, get to know the other fundraisers in your area. It's not like you're all fishing off the same pier. However, that is the challenge in our church schools, because churches also have capital campaigns and have annual fund needs and so forth. And especially if the school is being heavily subsidized by a church, you need to really stay in close contact with the church leaders about things I talked about today, because I can't see a pastor being happy that the school sends out an appeal letter and he doesn't know anything about it. That might not be a very good thing. And frankly, I would say with churches and schools, it's a great way to partner in the fundraising. Don't do two separates, join them together. And churches are great. They make an ask every Sunday. They pass that collection plate by every Sunday.
Yeah, so that's excellent advice. I see we're at the 11 o'clock hour here. Just
Yes,
a
sir.
couple more quick items as we finish off. One is we do utilize Joel for Genesis starts and Lutheran School Consulting Services. So this is part of what he does as well. And then we also, Joel has for a long time worked with our school leadership development program. The SLED program that we run where we talk about fundraising and development objectives with that, with all of our, whether they're current principals or maybe incoming, or they consider being a principal, because we recognize, as our good friend Dave Summermeyer always would state, no margin, no mission. And as Joel always would tell me in the years past, don't forget you're the CEO of a multi-million-dollar business as well.
Right.
So we are very much into it as a ministry, obviously, first and foremost, but you cannot forget the fact that you're probably overseeing a budget of maybe 1 million to 6 million to $20 million in the case of some of our schools or more. So don't forget that as well. So we thank Joel for his session today and for all of his work in his ministry at so many different places and the help that he gives in so many different ways. We give thanks for all of you joining us today, and we wish you a very Merry Christmas as we celebrate together the birth of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Blessings to you. May God continue to bless our Lutheran school ministries.
Thank you,